Hello, my name is Scott McGurn. We're doing a series on terrorism. This is number 6. Now, in the last video, number 5, I put some video links in the description. I didn't mention that in the last video. I should have. There are video links in the description. We know that our tax dollars are being used to fan the flames of hatred, and I wanted to put something in that shows what that looks like. So if you go back to number 5 when you get a chance, take a look, scroll down, look at the description, look at the video links. It really talks about the kind of Islamophobia that our tax dollars have created, that our governments have created. The last link is actually a song, and the last part of the song, the video shows Syria and the level of destruction, so I invite you to do that. Now, we know that the transnational or international banking cartel, whatever you want to call it, it's all over the world. This cartel wants to have one global monopoly. Okay, they want one central bank in control, and that's their objective. Okay, now I want to talk today a little bit more about their end game. What do they want the world to look like, and why do they see this as being so good? Now, when I was a lot younger, I had a friend. He was a very interesting fellow. His father was in the, he was an economist. He was in the international petroleum industry. You could call that very much a cartel as well. Not as powerful as the banks, but the global oil industry is very powerful. Here in southern Alberta, we tend to be part of that. It is very much a global thing. My friend's dad, he wasn't so much in the drilling or the mining of the tar sands, for instance. He would travel around the world, and he would help specifically third world countries to understand how to set up a system of taxation whereby they would get some of the benefit of their minerals and oil being mined and drilled out of their country. Instead of having industry come, take everything and then leave, he was helping them to have something to show for it. So he was a good person. And he would talk about the kind of perspective that others would have, a lot of people, big-time people in the oil industry. And that perspective was not something I haven't heard before, but I want to share that with you because you might not know. I've had a very interesting life. It's not a good life, but I've met very interesting people. You've probably had an interesting life too, and you might not think that you have. Maybe you've been in jail for 30 years. Well, if you learned 3 or 4 things in jail, you could share those things, okay? You could even write a book if you wanted to. I'm not writing a book, but you could. Share what it is that you've learned. Share your humanity with the next person. That's what I'm going to try to do. So, anyway, when these big-time oil guys sit around and talk, one of the things they'll say is, when you're drilling in Africa or whether you're mining in Africa, everything takes twice as long. Now, there's a racist component to that. They sometimes mention it, sometimes don't. Everything takes twice as long. Gosh, if we could just get rid of all these people, and if they could just let us do what we need to do, getting rid of these people. This is always a common theme. There's something about becoming a billionaire that seems to put the idea in your head that the world has too much population. Now, there are many people, many fascists, who are not wealthy who think the world has too many people. And one consistency that I've found in the way these people talk is they always come back to the number 500,000. They would like to see the world with 500,000 people, 500 million. Right now we've got over 7 billion. They think that's far too many. They want us to have 500,000. And, if they're willing to talk freely, if they've had a few drinks, they want the 500,000 to have white skin. In fact, there's 3 components to their criteria. First of all, fascists, they really have down to a science to figure out whether you're one of them or not. They want you to be willing. They want somebody that's one of them, and they want somebody who's wealthy. So, you know, I've kind of coined the phrase, it's like 3 W's. You've got to be white, you've got to be willing to be one of them, you've got to be willing to sell your soul. Have no problem with mass murder. So you got to be white, you got to be willing, and you got to be wealthy, because if you're not wealthy, you're not one of them. You've got nothing to bring to the table. So white, willing, and wealthy. You know, I've been hearing this since I was a kid, and the way that I've always heard when these guys are talking, what they want to do in the past, what I'd heard, you can bring down the population very easily with a simple virus. It doesn't even cost that much. A simple weaponized virus. Now the person on the street would say, oh, they never do that. Well, they've thought about it. Okay, here's the plan that I'd always heard. The plan was you have the weaponized virus, you come up with an antidote, okay, an inoculation, you research it backwards and forwards for years. You make sure this antidote is bulletproof, okay, because you don't want to take any chances. You make damn sure, with lots of human testing in a third world, you make damn sure that this inoculation means you are totally immune from this virus. 100%. You, your family, the people you like, whomever is going to be on board. Bulletproof inoculation, guaranteed to work, okay? Nobody will ever know that it's a man-made virus, and nobody will ever know there was an antidote. But you make sure you got the 500,000 people that you like inoculated in advance. It's bulletproof. When it's released, you know, oh, it's a terrible disaster. People won't notice that certain people are surviving and certain people aren't. And you yourself, listening to this, may know people that have money, and they've also got their little membership in their underground compound, so if there's ever a disaster in the world, they have a place to go where it's nice and safe until the dust settles. Okay. Their end game is that after the dust settles, they're going to have this utopian world made up of people that they like. Okay. I have heard this for my whole life. Maybe you haven't, you probably have. If you haven't, you should, because this is their mentality. This is the ego-based mentality. I want to get this across. Now, at the end of World War II, now you probably studied this in school, there was something called the Operation Paperclip. This was, they wanted, the Americans in particular, wanted to get the Nazi scientists, okay? Wernher von Braun, okay, you've heard of him. He was in charge of the NASA space program. He had invented the V-2 rocket, and all these Nazi scientists, the Russians wanted to get them, the British, the Americans wanted to get them. Operation Paperclip was, okay, they had files on all these Nazis, all these top German Nazis. So what they would do is, the Nazis they wanted, they would put a paper clip in that file. 1,600 Nazis had a paper clip in their file. So they never had to go to Nuremberg and be prosecuted. They were immune from the law. They could get American citizenship, money, live out their lives happily in the United States. So 1,600 at least Nazis were brought over to the United States, given top jobs in the U.S. government. Now, you know, if you've studied history, the U.S. government, the State Department, they're so damn fascist, it seems like the fascists are still in control. It's almost like the Fourth Reich down in the United States. And you've probably noticed this, and maybe it's true, and maybe it's not. But anyways, so these fascists, they want to see the world's population down to 500 million. This, no matter which group you're talking to, it always comes back to 500 million. I don't know how they arrived at that number, but it always comes back to 500 million. Now, in the past couple of years, it's come to my attention that there's another end game that has worked its way into the mix, one that does not involve a virus. So I want to offer this to you as a footnote. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to introduce you to someone that I discovered in the past couple of years. I don't know him personally. He's a medical doctor from down in the United States. He's a medical surgeon. He was an emergency room surgeon for many years. And what changed his life was the realization that with all of these wealthy people planning the eradication of most of the world's population, I mean, yeah, it's great to save one person at a time in an emergency room. That's a noble profession. I admire him very much. I particularly admire this fellow's bravery because turning all of his brilliance to research, he didn't come from a super wealthy family. It was like a military family. He's actually put $10 million, which was basically all of his assets, into doing this research for the past 25 years. He's been talking about this stuff for the past 25 years. So I'm going to introduce you to his perspective. He sees the final end game in regard to what these fascists want to do. He sees a different spin on it that I had not heard before. And I'm going to share that with you. And I'm going to share 2 links, and I'm going to include them in the description at the end of this. So I want you to take a look at those videos. Now, ultimately, whether the population is reduced to 500 million by a virus or reduced to 500 million some other way, the point is these fascists, through the international banking cartel, they're the ones that are organizing the terrorism. Wernher von Braun, on his deathbed, was talking about how first it's going to be the gaining of control through a lot of false flag terrorism, false events like 9/11. These falsehoods are going to take place, but then there's going to be a grand deception. Okay, I'm gonna talk a little bit about that grand deception now. When I started this series, I asked the question, what is it that makes one person want to kill another person? All right? If we don't understand that, we're not going to understand what happened in New Zealand. We're not going to understand why that guy from Australia came over and murdered 50 people in 2 different mosques. Did it in such a grotesque fashion. We're not going to understand anything. And if we're so naive, or if we're so far into denial that we say things like, oh, I can't comprehend how anybody could do something like that. All right, well, maybe this video isn't for you, or maybe it is. Okay, you've got to go deep into yourself and look at the human ego, okay? Now, living here in southern Alberta, and it doesn't really matter where you live, but I know that if you're in the oil industry, there is nothing you wouldn't do for money. I mean, when it comes to billions of dollars, people would murder their own family. They certainly wouldn't hesitate to murder yours. Seriously. I mean, think about it. Think about that, okay? Now, at the end of World War II, we're told that, we all know the Germans and the Americans were working on the atomic bomb. There was a lot of technology that seemed to come out of nowhere very, very quickly. All sorts of things were invented, from television to jets to nuclear to all sorts of things that came out of nowhere. We went from horse and buggy to jet planes in less than a decade. A lot of people have made the observation, how does any society go from horses and carriages to jet planes in less than a decade? That's pretty interesting. And we wonder about that, but we're given no explanation. If you're familiar with the scientist Tesla, the car company was named after Tesla. He's widely viewed as the most brilliant scientist of that century. Other people say it was Einstein, some people say it was Tesla, but nobody likes to talk about Tesla. He had all sorts of amazing inventions. In fact, he had an anti-gravity invention. You can actually see that on videotape, the anti-gravity thing. In fact, the reason that the Germans weren't completely successful at beating the Americans to the atomic bomb is that they saw anti-gravity as a superior weapon. With anti-gravity, you could take an unlimited amount of bombs, cross the Atlantic, do tremendous damage. You could do anything. You could improve production, transportation, everything with anti-gravity. They figured anti-gravity would actually be more effective and more impressive than nuclear. You could do more with it. Now, after Tesla died, the FBI went in, took all of these inventions, everything he'd done, and they just put a lid on it. We're not talking about it. It never existed. Well, that raises certain suspicions in and of itself. I mean, I can understand that the Rockefellers had tremendous influence in the United States. I understand that they created the largest oil and gas monopoly in the history of the world. What was it called? Well, it doesn't matter. You know what? The point is, if you were to have an anti-gravity device, the entire worldwide energy industry would be worth nothing. And much of the banking industry would be worth nothing overnight. So in other words, if you were to tell somebody, these billionaires, well, all of your investments are worth nothing. People anywhere can have an anti-gravity device. They can have zero-point energy, which is free energy. You can have all of this for free. You've worked all these years to become a billionaire, and that's going to be worth nothing, and this guy's going to have as much as you. I can see how, a family like the Rockefellers and others would want to put a lid on something like that. Now, whether that's true or not actually doesn't make that much difference in regard to the end game of the fascists. Whether they're going to reduce the population of the world through virus, or they're going to reduce the population of the world for some other reason, none of that makes any difference in regard to the fact that fascism is bad. Its root is the human ego, and I have described to you in detail how you can overcome your own ego, how you can influence American politics to undercut the fascists, prevent what's going on. I'm doing what I can. Now you need to do what you can. Spend the $20, kill fascism in the United States in the way that I've described. Watch the two videos that I'm going to share with you. I want you to see and hear what this man, Steven Greer, is sharing in his videos. The first video is his video testimony of generals and top people in intelligence in the United States that are still alive. You can see them, you can do all the research you want. They're giving their side of the story so that before they die, it comes out. So all these video confessions are on tape for you, provided by Steven Greer. I can't take credit for any of that. Then the second video link is Steven Greer himself putting out all of this information into the public domain, basically for his own protection, because once it's out there, you can't put the cat back into the bag. I'm going to leave all of this with you, and I want to give a few final notes. First of all, I respect Dr. Steven Greer because as a surgeon who's making a really good living, he could have done what the rest of us do and just say, why should I worry about what politicians and billionaires do? I've got a great life. I've got 4 kids. I want to see my kids be successful. If I try and stand up and do something, it's going to put my life in danger. My kids will be in danger. I've got a nice life. Why don't I just enjoy that and screw the rest of the world? I mean, who cares? Why should I care? Why do I need to be the hero? Well, he didn't see it as being a hero. He didn't see being a doctor as being a hero. Yeah, I mean, making the kind of money he was making, if you're a surgeon in the U.S. and you're making millions, a couple $1 million a year, why should he put his life savings and everything, work his ass off for 25 years just to be treated like a fool? So if that's what he's willing to do to save his country and making the world a better place, I ask the question, what are you willing to do to save your country and make the world a better place? What am I willing to do? It's the I part that really matters the most, because it's when we ourselves are willing to change and become better people. That is the only way anybody's ever made the world a better place. You can try to change others, you're wasting your time. If you change yourself, if you get rid of the ego and you change yourself and you change the way you see the world, suddenly everything that is wrong with the world goes from being in control to being on life support. You have more power and more tools inside of you than you could ever imagine. And all of that knowledge, all of that understanding, and all of that power is within you. Only you can unlock it. So I encourage you to watch the 2 videos that I have. I've got links, active links down in the description. You're one button away from all of that information. I'll let the people involved explain this and share this with you. You can either watch or not watch. I've made my response to the attacks in New Zealand. I saw what the Prime Minister said. It was very compassionate, but to me it's hypocrisy. If you spend years of time fanning the flames of hatred, putting money into dividing and conquering, like the Five Eyes nations do, if you can do all that, put that in, and then be so compassionate because somebody believed you and went out and killed a bunch of Muslims, I see that as 100% hypocrisy, and it pissed me off. Okay, so this has been my response to terrorism. If you're interested at all in how the world works, and maybe you're not, but if you are, if you're the kind of person who believes in doing the right thing, if you're the kind of person who thinks that truth and love has some actual value, then watch those 2 videos, because there's a lot we can do. We can be honest, we can share, and even though there might not be much we can do, if it only takes 20 minutes to do it, 10 minutes to do it, if it costs 20 bucks, well, how much easier is that? Because if you can't even do that much, then I'm sorry, but you're just a sack of shit. If you can do that, then you're a good person. My name is Scott McGurn, and I thank you for your time.